Okay, this video is about some mathematics and a bit of geometry um, regarding the pyramid. And, there's lots of different theories, and some are more sensible, some are more, unconventionally fantastical, um, without getting into all that stuff. But anyway, I'm just going to share my thoughts on this and the type of um, things that I have found. And to start with, I'm going to try to provide some additional information, some additional perspectives to which I think most people, to my knowledge, have not provided, and or either do not know or just for some reason don't care to think that it's important. But however, this is my take on some things here. So first of all, where did geometry come from? You can be the most super intelligent, super advanced, from and everything that comes with that. But even somebody with a super intelligence and the type of imagination, which is just out of this world, out of the universe, you can still you can't just come up with something. You can't just logically, intellectually come up with something unless you actually find an example of it somewhere. Everything has a beginning. And something, you need something to build off of. And so, where does geometry come from? Well, one of the few places in the natural occurrences that we find in nature. Okay, and there are other geometrical forms and platonic solids and so forth, but in particular, I'm gonna, to start with here, because they all have something to do with each other. But this is about the pyramid. So, where does geometry come from? Well, geometry comes from the most, um, uh, the most prevalent form of an octahedron. Okay, is found within pyrite crystals, for example. There might be a few others, but those are going to be very much more on the rare side of things. Where they might find one in some type of a crystal or something like that. That's not going to be as likely. However, pyrite is going to be found more often than these other types of minerals. And pyrite in particular, it has different platonic forms. It can be triangular, it can be cubic, it can be octahedronal, which is very important for the pyramid, because that's what it is. It's a half of an octahedron. Okay, and the early metallurgy points to the Pontic and Eastern Europe. Practically all of metallurgy points to these places, from the Copper Age up until gold and silver, and then the Iron Age. And so it is through these early, workings with metallurgy of finding these raw materials, because quite often, where you find gold, there's a higher likelihood of finding a pyrite and this kind of stuff. So it's working with metallurgy, especially in the extraction, of finding these raw materials, and in the process of chipping away through a rock and stuff like that. I mean, we are talking about a long time ago. We did not have the advantage of having these metal detectors and other uses of technology, to where it gives us a higher probability of where the metals can be found, for example. So that's where geometry comes from, as its basic and its most foundational, influence. It comes from metallurgy, and then people started to tinker around, and they came up with a mathematical science revolving these forms that were naturally found in nature, to which we generically refer to as geometry today. And of course, our geometry is much more advanced, than per se 5,000 years ago or whatever from before, and so that's another point here, and so somebody brought this geometry, okay, just even if you want to disregard all the other geometry, just the geometry of the octahedron itself, somebody brought that to Egypt. Okay, just think about that for a minute. And I've provided you enough information here already. If you are curious and interested, and if you want to be honest, instead of just thinking I'm going to pump out the next New York Times book bestseller just for some hits and some sensationalism, go over there if that's your thing. I'm just coming at this from a as honest as I can be anyway. There's nothing really in this for me. I'm just sharing something here. So, yeah, so someone brought this knowledge to Egypt. Okay, that needs to be understood. They were not the inventors of this. In fact, they were not even as advanced in metallurgy as the peoples of the Western Pontic were, who are the primary leaders in advanced metallurgy, including up till the Iron Age. And as I've said before, octahedrons are not super common, but they are more commonly found in pyrite crystals than anything else. And you can even do a quick search yourself on Google and check that out. So you just Google pyrite octahedrons, and you'll see how they come out in their natural state, from the earth, from the ground. They're not always perfect. Sometimes you get a half of it which is perfect, and I'm sure there's the one in a million, sample which has been found which is near perfection or something like that. But regardless, everything has a beginning. So that's the geometry side of things, and that's the octahedron. Now, let me get to my other notes here before I show you the math and the type of calculations and the type of construction logic that I will share. So to build anything, you first need some essential calculations. This is the other thing that some of these other people are not bringing into this part of the discussion. You need some essential calculations to build, even if it is as simple as an octahedron or just the top of an octahedron. You still need to work these things out mathematically. You need to calculate these things, how these angles will be derived, and then therefore later how the forms will be built. So a construction can start. First you need the math. Okay, without looking into what the zodiac signs are and what these occultish meanings are, and all that stuff is secondary, tertiary, and fourtiary. That we're talking about construction here, and many of these other people have no experience in construction. let alone any knowledge of just basic metallurgy. I, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Maybe they want to admit to a few things. I'm not sure. Go ask them. You know, and here's another one here. They were not as advanced as some of these people um, to project that they were. We are most definitely, in many ways, we are more advanced than anybody was 2500 BC. Okay, this is a ridiculous, childish, fantastical position to think that they were incredibly 100 times more advanced than we are today. That's just nonsense. You know, let's be realistic about this thing. I am open-minded. Maybe there are one or two things where we lost something. In fact, what I'm going to reveal today, I refer to these things as I have rediscovered something. You know, and it's not super advanced, but for that time period, they used the basic methods compared to our advanced methods that we have today. For their time period, it was something quite significant. But let's not project that, you know, into the realms of things which are fantastical. You know, and so they weren't as advanced as some people like to think that they were. Okay, first of all, the blocks are roughly cut on their exteriors. That's an indication that they weren't as advanced. They weren't, you know, perfectly, you know, manicured and highly polished, you know, sides of all the exterior blocks. They're rough on the outside. That tells you right there that they weren't as advanced as some people like to think that they were. They did some incredible things, don't get me wrong, but they weren't as advanced. And understanding basic construction knowledge here, you know, if they could levitate these huge tonnage of material, why did they use the largest blocks on the bottom? Because this is foundational, elementary construction, procedure. When you're building a form of that type, you in that time period, you are going to use your biggest ones on the bottom. You're not going to lift the biggest ones up onto the very top. You know, what would make more sense? That's why the largest ones are used on the bottom, and as they work towards the top, they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Because things have to be hoisted way the heck up there now. You're not going to hoist, you know, however tall that thing is, you're not going to hoist 40,000 tons or 100,000 tons, whatever the biggest one might be there, up that high. We didn't have a 10-story crane back then. So that's that one. The largest blocks are used on the bottom. And for any building, for any construction building project, whether you're building a foundation for a home or a building in our present time and age, or even 200 years ago. Okay, first and foremost, you need reference guidelines to build any form and building. You have to build the base. It is a square? Is it a rectangle? Whatever that it is, you need your guidelines to build within, and you stay online. Even today, string lines are still used to build basic foundation of housing. Some of you, even though you have no construction knowledge and or experience, you might have seen this before. They have sticks, they tie strings around them, they pull them taut from one corner to the other, and that gives you a straight line. And then they lay their brickwork or their cinder blocks or whatever other material that they need to put in that particular line and keep it straight. Okay. you need string lines. This is only more recent, where we have things of lasers now. Some people are using lasers and stuff like that. But even till this very day, string lines are still used. So for this type of a building project, you need these string lines and or rope lines. They might have had something more bulky back then. They most definitely would have used a type of a rope. And taut rope lines would have to be necessary to build the pyramid. And the rope lines would have to stem from a high central point towards the base. Yeah, you need something like a big pole, a big central tower at the height of the angles where they're all going to intersect at the top midpoint. You need to run all your lines, all your guidelines from up there. I mean, this is elementary construction here. Most likely they would have had 8, because if you look on the sides of the four-sided of a pyramid, you'll see that they are built in halves. So in fact, there are 8 sections. If you're looking down from it on a top view, there's a middle vertical that separates each four-sided segment. Okay, so you would need to run 8 lines, or 4 at minimal, and then perhaps you might rotate them as you build one side up. Because that's the other thing. You have to have these lines coming from the top center. And then you would need to build at minimum one side of your structure, 2 sides of your structure, 3 sides of your structure. Okay. And then you could build the last fourth of this type of a structure at the end, especially to complete it, because you are working from the bottom up, and so that's something to consider. That you need some kind of guidelines here. Even if you can levitate this material, and you're fully into that woo-woo stuff, you still need guidelines. Hey, maybe you can levitate the Eiffel Tower. You still need placement and guidelines. Somebody has to do the math. Somebody has to make these calculations, and somebody needs a really basic and foundational understanding of construction and labor. All right, so that's the rope, and yeah, from a high central point towards the base. And this, by the way, is very reminiscent of the maypole traditions that we have in some parts of Europe. And, just a coincidence here, perhaps, but May 1st, I believe, is the Swedish maypole tradition date. And that's like the 5th month and the 1st day, which gives you the numbers of 51, which is 51 point, whatever, 4285714. It is the number of 1/7 of a circle, 51. Maybe it's just a coincidence, guys. I don't know. And interestingly enough, the maypole has all these lines that are going off from the top central point. Maybe inadvertently, this ancient knowledge has been preserved through their folk traditions. And there are other parts of Europe who have these, in quotes, maypole type of traditional and cultural ceremonies. Yeah. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. There's something to chew on there. You make your own mind up. Okay. Foundations were built first. We already went over that point. Staying in line with the rope lines for guidance. These little discrepancies in perfect angles can only be determined today. These people are getting nitpicky on going, the angle is out by 0.5 of a degree, and it's point, 51.84, or when it should be 51.42, or then they work some other kind of geometrical logic out to validate these slight little imperfections. They are slight imperfections because they're not as advanced. If you're within 1 degree of a building of that size, that's as good as perfect for that time period. And you would have no idea of knowing if that thing is out at half a degree. It's only till now you can go up there with your laser beams and rely on scientific equipment, which gives you the accuracy to 20 decimal places, and digital stuff and all this. This is only today. Even 100 years ago, you would have not been able to know the difference. Oh my God, this is actually out half a degree. Like get real, people. Get real. It's still an incredible achievement. But make no mistake about it, they weren't as advanced as our equipment is today. For their time, it was the most advanced and efficient, and it was advanced and as efficiently built as possible for what they had to work with. Okay? And furthermore, like I said earlier, the largest blocks were on the bottom. And there's a fellow, his video is still circulating around YouTube. He's a retired construction worker, from America, which I think already now, by this time, millions upon millions of people have seen this now. And so for these, Egyptologists and these people who write books and talk about this stuff all the time, they should be well aware of this gentleman's video by now. If not, they're just taking you for a ride. And is that what you like? You like to go on these rides, do you? Well, what do you get out of it? Yeah, they're making all the money off you. But anyway, this retired construction worker proved how one man can lift 100,000 tons and stand them up on its vertical edge and move massive weights around. Just one man using foundational laws of leverage and physics. Okay, I'm not going to go into the detail. You go look for this yourself. Maybe somebody knows about this. So that's how this heavy material was moved around. There is no anti-gravity machines floating around. Especially then. All right. Let me get to my next point here. Sorry, I've written these notes here. I have to keep up with what I've already said and what I haven't said. Okay. Yes, and I've already mentioned this. I will mention it once more. The accuracy of within a degree is plenty enough for such a large-scale construction. Even by today's standards, if you are within half a degree of a large-scale construction project, that's plenty good enough. Okay? Let's just keep that in mind here. Not everybody is walking around with laser beam, technology in their heads. And they're going to walk around like, our modern cities and go, oh my God, did you see this? This side here is out. It's out by 0.3 of a degree. What are you going to do? Complain? It doesn't matter. It's so insignificant. However, some things do require ultra precision, like certain machine tools and machine equipment that need a high level of accuracy today. And they do have that stuff, and people do work in those fields. But for most construction, that level of accuracy is not required, nor is it really ever used. Like I said, a half a degree is plenty accurate enough for a large scale building project. Okay, I think that takes me to the end of my introductory notes. So what did we start with? I started with the where does geometry come from, especially the octahedron, and then some construction type of information. Excuse me. Okay. I think I'm going to do a part 2 here, guys, because I'm getting a bit long here, and I'm not sure if the video will continue. So I'll be back.